The committee meeting for law and government to order. May I have, I'll talk slowly. May I have a roll call, please, Kathy?
Sauger.
Yes, here.
Wagner.
Yes, here.
Hendricks. Campbell.
Here.
Kunkel. Shorten.
Here.
Altoff.
Here. We do have a quorum. I do believe that Mr. Kunkel will try and call in. He is under the weather. He sat through the Senior Services Grant Commission on Friday like a trooper, and I think I killed him. So he may call in, he may not. And I do know that Ms. Greeno has a scheduling conflict, and Mr. Hendricks will join us as soon as he finishes his court call. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes as presented? From Mr. Shorten, seconded by Ms. Wagner. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you. Moving on to public comment. I know we have Dan Mitchell signed in for public comment. Dan, can I invite you up to the table? Remind you, you have 3 minutes. And also to remind committee members and Mr. Mitchell that we do not respond or give any comments, questions during public comment.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Dan.
I'm going to give you some stuff to review after we have a chance to talk. I'm also going to give you
Thank you.
one of those that ask you to distribute to each of the board members. My name's Dan Mitchell from Johnsburg. I live right behind the fire station in Johnsburg that backs up to the Fox River. And I have an issue with the McHenry Township Fire Protection District. I don't think that I've been treated fairly. They came to me requesting an easement across my property for a launch ramp. After some back and forth, I granted them that easement with the understanding that they were going to build the launch ramp. It was a mutually beneficial arrangement at that point. After 2.5 years of no communication from them, I received notice that they decided not to do the project, which I was quite upset about, but I understand I can't force them to do the right thing. At this point, I would just like my money back, my out-of-pocket expenses that were associated with my part of getting that easement put together. Basically, it's my attorney review from that time period, and then I reached out to an attorney most recently to help me through this process. And so that's about $2,000. They, at one point, actually agreed to do that, but then I think there's some political jockeying back and forth with the village of Johnsburg, who also has an issue with this. So at the end of the day, they refused to give me my out-of-pocket expense that was associated with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Moving on, and let's add Mr. Hendricks to the roll. Moving on to member comments. Do any members have any comments this morning? Seeing none, we move on to new business. There really is no new business this morning. Routine consent agenda. Does anyone want anything removed from the consent agenda for discussion?
Yes.
So yes, Mr. Hendricks, which one would you like to remove for discussion?
It would be the second and third one.
6.2 and 6.3?
Yes.
Do I have a motion then to approve 6.
I was going to pull 6.1.
Okay, all open for discussion. Let's start with 6.1. Ms. Wagner, please.
So, yeah, thank you. So I don't have an issue with this resolution per se at all. I was just looking at the resolution itself, and usually there is a follow-up page that talks about how it affects different portions. So hold on, I'm going to move to I printed it out and then I forgot it at home. So it talks about the action requested, background discussion, impacts on human resources, finances, and I was just wondering if this is something you would include in your resolutions.
Yeah, there was kind of a time crunch with that as far as getting it forward and things of that nature. I was doing it on Friday and things of that nature, so it probably was missed per se. But as far as impact, it doesn't have any impact on anything really. So it's just it's a new software program that we've been kind of looking at, and like I said in the resolution, you know, we've gone through, or I have gone through probably at least a half a dozen companies as far as researching what's best for our office and things, and what we can do to not just get when you get a program like this, it's kind of, it's a set program. But some companies let you, like Cohero, will work with you as far as adjusting it to your office per se, which was really good because of the statistical analysis that I gave them to show and how we can implement that of the statistics that we give you on a monthly basis, and actually adding things forward with the annual report and things in that nature. They were very responding with that and didn't really have any issues. And probably if there was really no huge impact, they were going to give it to us for free and things of that nature. So
this won't, what I'm requesting is just for, when it goes forward to the board, just to have that documentation page in the back.
Sure.
How is this going to affect the budget for next year? Is it already included in a supplemental?
Yes, it's included in the supplemental.
Okay.
Yeah, so, and it'll be taken out of the coroner's fund per se.
It will.
Every year.
Okay.
Going forward as well. This is kind of, the price that we got with them was kind of a first year discounted rate, and then next year it'll be bumped up a little bit, and then there's obviously a percentage increase dependent upon CPI and things of that nature every year. Right.
Okay, that's all I had.
Okay,
Thank you.
Is that then a motion to approve?
Yes,
Motion
motion to approve.
Do I have a second to that? Mr. Shorten, roll call vote, please.
We have Kunkel, do we want to vote him in?
Yes, and add Mr. Kunkel to the roll. Thank you.
We need to vote him in.
Do I have a motion to allow Mr. Kunkel? Ms. Campbell, seconded by Ms. Wagner. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
There he is, thanks.
Kunkel,
It's a motion to approve 6.1.
he's muted.
You're muted, Mr. Kunkel.
Yes.
Thank you.
Campbell,
Yes.
Hendricks,
Yes.
Wagner,
Yes.
Sauger,
Yes.
Shorten,
Yes.
Altough.
Yes. Mr. Hendricks, 6.2, discussion?
Yeah.
And may I ask, Kathy, can you come up and just in the event there are questions, you can answer, please? Lori.
Hello. So I guess one of my questions was the contract for the printers, it's $141,750, $141,000. What is this fund used for? Is this like is there gonna be a future problem?
No, it's statutorily, it's set aside just to fund your electronic citations. Prior to 2019, there's a circuit clerk portion of that statute of the fee, and then the arresting agencies get a small portion of the fee as well. Prior to the Criminal Traffic Assessment Act in 2019, we got less, but on more tickets. And so we funded just about enough to cover the annual subscription for the license for eCitation software for the entire county. So we cover all the agencies for their eCitation software. But then in 2019, when it changed, the circuit clerk's portion went up. We get it on less tickets, but we're getting $8 now per ticket. So our fund balance has built. We were holding off because we went to a new eCitation vendor and we weren't sure if that was going to be more expensive. So, we had some fund balance, but wanted to see if we were still going to be able to fund it with the new vendor. And we moved over to the new vendor. All is good. We still have this fund balance. But the new software, some of the agencies running on these older printers, they're not super readable. The readability on the tickets, the old printers just don't work very well with the new software. So we had the fund balance available. Many of the agencies didn't have the funding, even the sheriff being one of them didn't have the funding to upgrade all their printers to the newest and best printers. A couple agencies didn't have printers at all. So this is not only getting everyone to the better printers, it's also getting a few of the smaller agencies eCitations for the first time, which helps all of us because it's really reduced the amount of staff that we have in the office. Back in the day when we used to key all those citations in by hand, we had a lot of people sitting around doing that. But yeah, the fact that the data comes in, the PDF of the ticket comes in, everything's fed right into our system, also gets fed into the arresting agencies into their record management system. So it saves a lot of people a lot of time and money inputting that information. So I do think we're still going to have a little fund balance left, so I think we've got enough fund balance that going forward, we can probably also be able to replace their printers going forward.
Okay, and that's the only thing the fund's allowed for?
It's pretty specific to
Okay.
electronic citation.
So is that a motion to approve the resolution as presented?
Unless anyone else has.
I have one
Oh,
question.
I'm sorry, sure, Ms. Wagner.
I was just surprised that the fellow arresting agencies were purchasing them for the other agencies. Do you expect them to replenish the fund at all to reimburse you?
No, I mean, because really it's what the fund is for the citation program, and since with our increase in the fee and what we're paying currently for the software, we've got, the excess funds to be able to fund the printers. So no, we aren't looking for reimbursement.
Okay, thank you.
So do I have a motion from Mr. Hendricks and a second from Ms. Wagner to approve the resolution?
I'll make that motion.
Second. Thank you. May I have a roll call vote, please?
Sager.
Yes.
Wagner.
Yes.
Kunkel.
Yes.
Campbell.
Yes.
Hendricks.
Yes.
Shorten.
Yes.
Altough.
Yes. Mr. Hendricks, 6.3, and Seth, I think this is you. Can I ask you to come up, please?
Sure can.
Thanks.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. Mr. Hendricks.
So I guess one question I had is how did the expected budget double for this specific item? It was 125 for.
Right.
And now it's estimated at being 270
Roughly, yep. So we use a 5-year trend average to kind of estimate each expense that we're going to have going into the next budget year. And actually, the 5-year expense trend, it looked like about 125. In fact, the 4-year trend is 103, 475. When you exclude so far in 2023. So that was the basis for it, which was done in June and July of last year. And then in December, we had a new IGA with Kane, which raised the daily rate from 135 a day to 175 a day for the kids to be there. And then we had kind of some unusual things happen in 2023 as far as kids in detention. We've had 2 kids that were actually DCFS wards ultimately, as decided by the court. They came in on delinquency matters, but ultimately it was determined that they were a DCFS ward, and then DCFS has to place those minors, and sometimes that takes a long time. And we continue to pay for those kids while they're in detention until DCFS places them. We also had at least one that I can think of off the top of my head, 17-year-old who technically by legal standard is a juvenile, but committed some weapons crimes in the county, and so was being charged as prosecuted as an adult. That minor has to be housed at the Kane County Juvenile Justice Center, and I believe the bond was like $335,000, so there was no way for that person to get out of custody, so he remained in custody for probably more than 6 months awaiting his trial. In fact, when he turned 18, he was moved over to the detention center. So there's been, I would say, an increased use coupled with an increased cost, as driven by the IGA that had to be renewed. And so that's what kind of drove the difference between what we estimated for 23 and what we're actually experiencing.
And so you don't think going forward it's gonna be like, this isn't like a permanent situation then, other than the increased cost from the IGA? I know it can be unpredictable,
It is
right?
very unpredictable.
But you don't believe that there's some structural issue in the estimation, especially now that we have the increased IGA of 175 a day built in going forward?
I mean, we did, so in budgeting for 24, we put considerably more money towards it, and in fact, that expense is moving over to the court in 2024, and the court is accounting for this higher cost this year, so it's budgeted more accordingly to what we're seeing. To answer your question as directly as I can, we figured for the IGA change, and then we also figured for this kind of uptick in use. I would say that it's trending back to where it was probably in 2017 and before. We used to see 200,000 plus in detention annually. So it's actually kind of getting back to a more normal state. And to your point, year to year, it fluctuates.
Right.
Depending on the crime that we see in the county for minors.
And then my last question then.
Sure.
78,000 was expended from other areas of the budget. Are there gonna be future emergency requests for those other areas?
No, we don't anticipate that. We tried to, in areas where we had kind of a shared expense, we tried to use the probation service fee side of it more so that we could use the general funds within the series to apply towards the detention costs. But we do not anticipate any other appropriations for this budget year.
Okay. That's all my questions.
I also too, how many years is that IGA with Kane?
Uh,
What is the length of?
We're in the process of renewing one right now for 3 years.
3 years,
At
okay.
the same
Just to
rate,
give
no
us
change.
Right, just to give us an idea of what that expense is gonna be. Mr. Shorten?
So just a quick question, you mentioned 2 kids that were DCFS wars, I'm assuming that they were arrested or just put into protective custody?
They were arrested on criminal charges, but then ultimately through, the process, it was determined where we had parents who were unwilling or unable, and that by definition kind of invokes DCFS involvement. And then ultimately through, the court process, the determination was made that these minors, when we place a minor in residential placement, the intent is to ultimately bring them back to the community and reunite with the family or, whatever that situation is at home. But these 2 minors in particular, there was not a viable return home plan. So DCFS then steps in as the ward for them and then makes placement. But that sometimes takes several months.
So when these minors, and I know this is getting the specific situation, but when these minors become wards at DCFS and they're still in juvenile detention, but they're still in juvenile detention because they're still going through the court process or because there's nowhere else for them to go?
They're court involved. It kind of becomes a juvenile abuse and neglect matter rather than a juvenile delinquency matter.
Okay.
And so they are still court involved. The court is still determining the course of action, I guess, for their situation. But it's more about providing the structure and everything that child was not getting through the family at home, as opposed to more of a consequence-based situation. But detention is really the only spot that once a kid's in there that DCFS has until they're able to place in a long-term residential facility.
Okay, and there's no reimbursement coming from DCFS in those types of situations?
No, statutorily, I think there's language in there that allows them out of that. We've certainly tried to press that issue with them, but never gained traction, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Ms. Wagner?
So I don't know how many times we use the IGA with Kane. Just wondering, would it be beneficial at all to look in the future and maybe have our own juvenile detention center here?
It's certainly been explored before. In fact, if I'm going way back, my mother, who used to be with the probation department years ago, there was impetus back then in the early 80s to look at a detention center. The cost of building it and staffing it and all the overhead for the amount of minors that we house is never gonna equalize. And our neighbors to the east in Lake have a detention center, Winnebago has a detention center, and Kane. So we're kind of surrounded by counties that do. And so we wouldn't be able to probably offer our services to other counties in a way that would kind of offset our own cost.
In fact, DuPage closed theirs.
They did, and they used Kane.
DuPage, of course, they're 3 times our size. They made the calculation that it was more cost effective to send their youth to Kane County.
Kane, yeah. And Kane houses, I think, 7 different counties of minors at the facility, so.
I was just thinking, we have that extra space in the jail, but that might be too institutionalized to.
Yes, the juvenile detention center, Seth probably knows better than I do, but the key 2 terms are usually sight and sound.
Separation, yeah.
They have to have sight and sound separation, so it's a completely separate facility that you would have to build up.
You have better food, better education, more outside time. There's just a lot of things.
Good to know, all right.
Good question, though.
Good to repeat periodically. Any other questions for Mr. Kraft? Then can I have a motion to approve Resolution 6.3, Mr. Sager, seconded by Mr. Shorten? Roll call, please.
Wagner,
Yes.
Sager,
Yes.
Campbell.
Yes.
Hendricks,
Yes.
Kunkel,
Yes.
Shorten,
Yes.
Altough.
Yes. Moving right along, the next item on the agenda, Alicia, please join us, is the legislative update. And I'm going to apologize and throw myself on the grenade and let you know that I did not set a date certain of submittals by county board members for legislative ideas. There are still several board members that have ideas that they haven't necessarily flushed out. So the decision was made is we will give all of you another month to kind of submit something for us to consider. But in the interim, we have many ideas that came from staff and other constitutional offices, and we'd like to take some time today to have those individuals present what it is that they're suggesting. So I'm going to turn it over to you, and my suggestion would be is, why don't we let Mr. Iwaniki go first, because it's a federal issue as opposed to state, but no?
I know that our
Scott?
Director Chukwu needs to get, train some individuals.
So let's go there first then.
Right. So again, there were 4 different items submitted by elected officers and department heads, and Director Chukwu is the first up to bat, as she's been working hard with the state's attorney's office to develop corrections to the paid worker or paid leave for all workers act.
Yeah, so there was an act that was put through, and I don't know what the thinking was behind it, we can only guess, and it was that they're saying that every employer, with I think it's 50 employees or more, has to offer employees 40 hours of paid time off a year. And what's unique about this is the 40 hours, the employee doesn't have to say, I need to take 5 hours to take my kid to band practice or to the doctor. They don't have to tell you why. They just get 40 hours a year.
They don't need permission.
They don't need permission. They're just going to tell you, and they don't have to tell you why. And they get it. And this is going to be effective January 1. So when we looked at that, we already offer more than 40 hours a year with vacation time, sick time, personal time. We already exceed 40 hours. So there are several groups across the state that have come together to look at proposing alternative language to get it through the sessions before January 1 effective date. So school districts are already exempt, park districts are already exempt. I think state employees are already exempt, and we're saying you need to add county, municipal, and township government entities also who have language already out there. So that language has been drafted. It's starting to be disseminated to other places. We're going to have sign-on. So we're hoping that that gets modified before January 1. So we're watching that. We're participating in that. We're contributing to that. We'll see where it goes. But we already offer more than that. So it's kind of silly. And I know that there are some employers out there that don't offer, and I see where it's beneficial, but for us, it's not. So, yes.
Mr. Short.
So is this new law, 40 hours, can they just call the morning of and say, I gotta take my kid to?
Yes, and
Or
again,
just gonna take the time
operationally, if he has every correction officer on a shift and they all decide that they're gonna go to a baseball game that day, operationally, he can't say, nope, you can't go. He can't say that. He can't say that right now. And so it's problems.
Mr. Hendricks?
Would a contract, like a union contract, would that supersede in
Yes.
that instance? Okay.
Yes, and there are some.
I just wanted to.
It does point
There's
out,
no-
but we don't want it to be a bargaining.
So there are some, they actually have better benefits now than what this 40 hours is. So again, in negotiations, I'm not going to talk about negotiations now, but we need to look at that language because actually employees are getting better than what the state is saying we have to offer. So, I mean,
Which makes sense.
we'll see where that goes. We're actually in negotiations with those units right now.
Mr. Sager?
How many personal days do they have right now?
2 or 3, depending on what department you're in, because some people work on
Lincoln's birthday.
Lincoln's birthday and some don't. So it's either 2 or 3.
The court-related folks have to take Lincoln's birthday off because it's a state holiday. Everybody else gets a floater to use.
Yeah.
So your big concern, if I'm understanding this correct, is the notice. Is that correct?
That's
the primary concern.
That's huge for operational needs, like for the nursing home. We can't just have a group decide they're not coming in. Operationally, we're gonna be in violation of state minimum staffing.
It's not additional time for us, it's
How they
40
use it.
hours that you don't have to get permission for.
Yeah.
And that doesn't work
And
for
and
the
again,
nurses at Valley High,
yeah,
the law enforcement staff. And right now, there's an exemption for public works employees at municipal and county levels, because I think there was some spot that this doesn't work for everybody, like if you have to plow some or something like that. So we either need a carve out to further exempt law enforcement, corrections, public nursing, or the simpler way is just to get a countywide exemption.
and that's where we're
the path
starting.
we're going now.
That's where we're starting.
I mean, in your example, the fact of the matter is that if everybody got together and said we're going to take a personal day to go to the ballgame, they could actually do that now, correct?
No, they'll have to get approved.
Personal days, they have to provide a reason for personal days today.
We have
Personal days have to be
mandatory staffing minimums, and
Have to request
then each employee's allowed one emergency personal day that doesn't matter with the minimum, so the contract kind of protects that, at least for, on my side of the house.
All right, and so can you tell me where you think this is in terms of likelihood of being amended?
Wow, I would be shooting in the dark. There's a lot of,
The Council of Governments across the metro area are kind of coming together. Northwest Municipal Conference was taking lead. Shailen's been involved in a number of those meetings, along with Cheryl and Colette, the State's Attorney's Office. I think there's a lot of traction.
and I know that through those meetings, we've heard of downstate groups who are also moving on this.
And so the original bill sponsors, are they behind this? You don't know?
We don't.
Ms. Wagner?
So I would think, hospitals, there's more than just government. There's a lot of things where people can't just call off. So I don't understand why they would pass a law like this. So I guess my question is, are there businesses who don't offer time off at all?
Yes. And so this would be good for them. The fact that you can't, because for operational reasons, deny it is a problem,
Yeah.
That's the issue. Yeah. Mr. Shorten?
I just had a similar comment, like I don't know what government or business, how you can operate a profitable entity when you have especially limited staff showing up and someone just says, I'm gonna drop.
Well,
it.
it's 50 or more.
I believe it was
You
50 or more.
you accrue at 1 hour of,
For every 40
for
hours, you
4
have
hours
to
a
give
week, you
1
get 1
hour.
hour of I don't need to ask permission time.
Yeah, and I mean, okay, so 50 is a little bit larger, but still, if a quarter of your staff decides they're not coming in because
And they
Sox
don't,
tickets are cheap, you know.
But
Um,
I will tell you, just leaning over and smiling at Mr. Hendricks and having a sidebar conversation, oftentimes Springfield does not think out every single scenario. People come to the table with their own perception, dealing with their own, individual issues, and don't think how it's going to impact other entities, and that's why there's so much trailer legislation. So I'm hopeful,
so we're working on it.
so thank you.
We'll keep you
Mr.
updated.
Can you send me the public act that was on?
Of course, sir.
I appreciate it.
Any other questions? I do believe this is something that, we'll continue to track. I think it'll probably come up during veto session to try and get corrected before then. But we'll keep you apprised of the bill number, et cetera, and there might be an opportunity for us to do something much more proactive with a resolution or something of that nature. So we'll start that.
Thank you. The next item, per Chair Altoff's request, is the VAC's legislation. They want us to support HR 984, a piece of legislation in Congress right now that would allow VAs to give grants to the states to promote veteran benefits. And we have Director Ilana Key here, who's under the chair, to discuss this matter.
I'm superintendent.
Superintendent.
My apologies, sir.
So this is a federal bill, and it allows the VA to give out grants for the promotion of veterans' benefits in starving areas. It's a commitment to veteran support and outreach. And the money would go to states. And I believe they were talking about $50 million over 4 years. I was not really clear on how they wrote the language. It's either $50 million over 4 years or $50 million a year for 4 years. But I'd like to look at it as $50 million over 4 years. And the money is to be used to promote programs that help veterans and their family members. And basically let them know about the benefits that are available and to assist those agencies that are helping those families with funds to help do this. Do I think McHenry County would get much of this? Probably not, because they're looking at starved locations. So my guess is if this passes, most of the money is going to go to Cook County because they have huge service deserts within that county. It's also probably going to go more down south where it's needed. But the possibility does exist, depending on how the language is, that we can get some funding as well to help promote this.
Is this to promote the awareness of veterans
Actually, there's
benefits,
actually
or?
funding for, well, the funding that they put in for staffing is for the VA to administer it. But the funding is to promote and expand existing programs. So like we have a wellness program, that's probably where I would put the money. If money is available in McHenry County for this, that's where I'd put the money, is in the wellness programs to address mental health issues. Okay, so
I was thinking like transportation.
Does the legislation specify entities, or does it just say money to the state and the state gets to allocate where the money goes?
it's supposed to go to counties. So it's supposed to be spread out to counties specifically, counties, tribes, states, specifically in those places where there is the biggest need.
Okay, got it.
That's how the language in the acts is written.
Any other questions for Superintendent?
Or just Mike.
Or just Mike. Okay, thank you very much. Can you keep us, again, we've got the number if anything changes immediately, but I certainly think that that's something at a federal level that.
And I believe NACO is signed on to this as well, National Association of Counties.
So thank you.
All right, next up to bat, we have the Division of Transportation. Now, I understand from the County Board and from the Division of Transportation that there is a desire to have more parity in terms of paying for transportation for both oil and fuel vehicles and electric vehicles. So with that, we have Assistant Director.
Or just Scott.
Or just Scott, here to talk about different options that we could pursue.
So yeah, first off, this isn't Scott, this isn't Joe, this isn't DOT asking for this. This is really our Transportation Committee, of which Matt Kunkel sits on, as well as Director Mr. Sager. So they tasked us with kind of reaching out to this committee, asking for this to be put on the agenda. Really, the whole idea is the county has had a county option motor fuel tax since the 90s, which assesses a per gallon fee on drivers in McHenry County who purchase fuel in McHenry County. But we don't have anything comparable on the EV side. So I'll start with a question. Who can tell me, take a guess, in November of 2017, how many EVs did we have registered in McHenry County? Take a wild guess. 2017.
100? 0?
100's a good guess. So we had 154 EVs in 2017 in November. Take a guess how many we have today. You're probably going to overestimate, but just take a guess.
8,500.
So right now, in August of 2023, we have 1,841. So it's over a 10-fold increase in a matter of 6 years, less than 6 years. So obviously, this is a growing problem. It's not necessarily a problem today in 2023, but in 2030, if nothing changes, I think this could be a significant amount of revenue that we are losing, that we're not able to maintain the roads and bridges that we have in the county because we're not taxing the majority of people who are using EVs in 2030 or 2035. So I just kind of wanted to throw that out there. I can answer questions if there are any, but thanks for kind of listening to my little spiel.
And I think from my perspective, just so we have that conversation, I mean, I think this would be a broad, again, like, oppose any unfunded mandates. This would be support programs or support avenues to be able to keep that balance. I mean, I don't think it's anything specific, because I think there's going to be an awful lot of conversation about avenues on how to do this. And so I think from our perspective, from a legislative agenda, it would be a broader topic as opposed to a specific piece of legislation or a specific way to do it. So, Mr. Short and Mr. Sager.
Yeah, just doing some of the basic math that I used at the last board meeting, that's about $92,000 in estimated revenue if they were putting gas in their electric vehicles, which hopefully they wouldn't do because that wouldn't work out well. But I mean, if, again, a broader topic, I agree, but it ought to be looked at beyond electric vehicles. It should probably be, there should be some mechanism with hybrids, because obviously their fuel consumption is lower. Maybe it's a stick for people that don't have hybrids or electric vehicles. But also there's a lot of development in technology around hydrogen.
Hydrogen, I knew you were going to say that, yeah.
So, and that's going to be important to.
I'm glad you brought up hybrids. I have the stat on hybrids. In August of 2023, we've got about 8,000 hybrid vehicles registered in McHenry County. So you add the two together, you're close to 10,000 hybrids and EVs just in McHenry County alone, and growing every year. EVs are growing exponentially. Hybrids are growing not exponentially, but they're still growing as a share of the overall percentage of fleet. So to your point, yeah, there is a fairness issue, right? If you tax EVs with a county option EV tax, but hybrids are not included in that, hybrids could pay less than EVs or standard internal combustion engine vehicles could. So, and maybe I'll throw this out there for the committee to consider too, and I know Alicia has heard me say this spiel before, but this is a temporary stopgap measure. The tax on EVs would be a temporary thing. Ultimately, the system as a whole, and I'm not talking McHenry County, I'm talking about the federal and the state systems, need to start thinking about taxing something other than your fuel consumption or your electric consumption. And I think that the industry as a whole is going towards a tax on per mile. So instead of, no matter what type of fuel you use.
I filed that a zillion years ago, but anyway.
A per mile fee is ultimately where things are going to go. And it's going to be, not next year or the year after, but, by 2030, I think you're going to see a lot of movement at the federal and state level towards a per mile fee, because that is the fairest way to assess people's usage of the system, right? So whatever we're talking about with EVs is just mainly going to start, hopefully just tide us over until that per mile fee is put into place.
So we'll work on wordsmithing some broader, but that's basically the topic, is just to make sure we still obtain revenues to take care of our roadways and bridges. Mr. Sager.
I understand that we're looking at it very broadly, and I appreciate that. I think that's the appropriate thing to do at the present time. But foundationally, are we looking at something that is totally new and pushing that, as you're talking about it per mile fee, which really isn't that new because it's been discussed for a long time, but or are we looking at trying to claw back, if you will, from the state some of the fees that are already increasing for registration of electric vehicles?
I think you could do both. And the reason I say that, so that the state, taking a look just at the state motor fuel tax, and the EV fee through the registration process that the state assesses, Mr. Sager is correct. We don't get any of that EV money here at McHenry County. The state IDOT controls all of that. They use that on their system. They don't share that with the locals. So that is something we could look to do and the state is looking at this right now, how to reasonably distribute some of that EV money down to the local agencies, not just counties, but states, townships, municipalities as well. So that's one thing. I think the county could also look, just like we have our own separate from the state, our own separate county option motor fuel tax, we could have our own separate EV registration fee in addition to the state's EV registration fee. So I think you could do both. You could create something new, and you could also look to redistribute the pot that's already there at the state level.
With the discussion over the next 2 years on what to do with the RTA, the discussion of EV fees is going to come up. It's going to be in there. So to Scott's comments, it's going to be easy enough to to talk about adding an additional piece for the county, whether that's mandatory or optional or some combination. It's going to come.
And I should know this, is there a registration fee for gas, at the state level for gas, right?
There is, but it's significantly less.
It's significantly less, and that is one of the issues. And then if you go, the other complication, because part of the reason you want to capture something from the EVs is because they are heavier vehicles and they have more wear and tear, not so much, I mean, they become more equivalent like with your trucks and that sort of thing, right? But a per mile then also puts a heavier burden on your smaller cars, because now they're they're not really beating up the roads. I mean, you and your, in your scooter, whatever, I don't know how this works, right? So, I think it's complicated, but it's something that needs to be done going forward, but.
There's a lot
of
more,
issues.
there's a lot of challenges just in any of those conversations. I can remember, and now it's almost 9 years ago, when we started this taxing per mile. There were a lot of people that resented the fact that you'd have a device in your car that would actually be tracking you, right? I mean, that was a major issue that we couldn't get over, that hurdle, and people resented that. And that would also give insurance companies a lot more data about how you drive, where you drive, et cetera, So there are many, I don't want to, say it's easy. There are many hurdles that need to be addressed, and you're right, it'll be part of all conversations moving forward.
So we'll see where this discussion goes. I don't know if it makes sense for McHenry County to offer a solution. Just simply saying we want to be part of the discussion. We know that there needs to be.
And we support some kind of a balance and redistribution so everybody's paying their fair share. Yeah, I think.
To get around that privacy issue, I know some states, they've offered the per mile fee is a voluntary. So you can either continue to pay your motor fuel tax at the pump, or people that don't have issues with privacy, the little transponder in their vehicles, you could transition over to a per mile fee today, and actually you can get a discount if you do that. Some states are offering a 10%, 20% discount for those that choose voluntarily to adopt that method. And by doing that, they're able to save money and then also gather data around how the system could work in the future. So there is a lot of examples out there. Oregon, the West Coast states are really leading with all of this.
They're in the lead.
But eventually we'll be there too.
Mr. Sager?
Don't misinterpret this, please, but because I've never been a fan of this, but have we ever talked at the county level about a county permit fee, vehicle permit fee?
Can we do that?
Not in my time.
I don't know that we have that authority.
Yeah, I don't think we do. I think that's the problem. I don't think we can do that.
Municipalities can.
In the amount of authority we have as a county, we are extraordinarily limited. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Wagner, I apologize.
I'm on the wrong side today. So just throwing it out there, I went and had my emissions checked and they asked what the mileage was. So that's one way to get around it, but not that we're here to solve the problem. Excuse my ignorance, but how do we have the trucks, the big heavy trucks, pay their fair share? Do they have, I assume they have higher registration fees. How else do they contribute?
Well, they're less fuel efficient as well, so they're buying more fuel and therefore contributing more that way. They're also assessed higher toll in the tollway system. So there is some variable pricing depending on the size and the weight of the vehicle, but with a per mile fee, again, not to keep going back to that, but you could say that trucks are assessed at 2 cents per mile, passenger vehicles are assessed at 1 cent per mile. You could do the variable per mile fee differently depending on the vehicle classification. And that is what other experiments are doing right now. You could also, kind of not to get too wonky, you could also say that if you're driving in congested corridors, your per mile fee is higher than if you're driving in a rural part of McHenry County, that there is no congestion. So you're incentivizing people to maybe choose other options, other routes that are, that would prevent congestion in the future. So there's a lot of really, really cool things that this per mile fee unlocks from a transportation perspective that you cannot do with a per gallon motor fuel tax, for example.
Aren't there cities that do that? Like if you go in, you drive in their downtown, a toll or something.
Yeah, New York just implemented a cordon fee, they call it. If you enter Manhattan during peak hours, you pay a fee just to get inside Manhattan. It's $100, I think, to get in, to drive in. Stockholm, a lot of European cities have already done this years ago. So we're getting a little off topic, but I do think, to Pete's point, I think supporting not only the state efforts, but also the federal
level.
efforts, which I think honestly, something like this is gonna have to be led by the feds. And the states are gonna follow, but the feds are gonna be.
And can you wordsmith that so that we have,
General,
yeah,
supporting the dialogue.
right. Thank you
You're
very, very
welcome.
much.
Glad to see you all.
And we saved the favoritist for last? Sheriff? You're the favoritist. I was gonna say the best, but then I knew I was gonna get busted.
You just busted yourself a favoritist.
Everybody loves law
Grammar
enforcement.
too.
So, Alicia, do you want to make the intro,
Absolutely.
please?
So last but not least, we have our sheriff, and he has put forward some suggestions regarding the new police social worker program. So in 2022, legislation went through to make some communities test cases for police social work-like programs. One was in St. Louis and one was in Waukegan. However, as I understand it from the sheriff, they are not quite up and running yet our program is. So the idea would be to amend the legislation to have our program added on as another one of the test case, and of course, make it eligible for the $10 million odd that has been allocated for police social work programs that are test cases. So with that, Sheriff, feel free to take it away.
So I don't know if you guys got all the packet, but Alicia she can share that with you guys. So this started with, the Illinois Sheriff's Association had asked for proposed legislation. I took it upon myself to make sure that we got recognized, one, for the police social work program that we're already doing. I knew that, so it's East St. Louis, Peoria, Waukegan, and Springfield, all were awarded a piece of a $10 million program to fund their co-responder pilot programs. If you look at how the law reads, everything that's requested is all the stuff that we are currently doing. And I was just more upset that we had Speaker Welch come in and see that program. And they acknowledge that our program is what they're looking for, but we weren't added into that initial legislation. $10 million is allocated or put aside for it. East St. Louis got just over $1 million, Peoria got over $3 million, Springfield got $3.1 million, and Waukegan got $2.3 million. But I did a little digging, none of them are actually up and running. So they got money for, programs that are going to be running. At a minimum, there's still $400,000 that's hanging around there, just this program. So at a minimum, I'd like to at least get a bite at the apple just to offset the costs that we're already doing. It's pretty, I just saw funding out there and I figured why not try to offset the cost. The reality is we had built this out and Peter, you can correct me if I'm wrong, $900,000 was kind of the idea. Funding was third from mental health board, third from law enforcement participating agencies, and a third from the county. Let's be honest, an offset of $400,000 would be really, really nice in a $900,000 program. If we're just gonna talk about numbers, that's really what it is. So the law in place is what we're doing. I'm just asking to be recognized for what we're doing. King County, it sounds like took our program, and I just shipped our general orders to King County, to the sheriff's office, because they're kind of thinking, I know there's some other things that are going on there, but the overall idea of this program is going to work on a countywide basis for whoever wants to be part of it. So I think just to be recognized for what we did is only fair.
Does anybody have any questions? Do you know how that legislation was originally put together, that those specific communities were identified?
I don't. I know that, so Jim Kychek at the Illinois Sheriff's Association was gonna work on the original people that put that bill forward to talk to them. I've also sent this to all of our local representatives. I'm going to encourage that we send it to all of our mayors actually, and the agencies that are currently part of this are also gonna have conversations with their representatives, because I think it's important that we all recognize, if we get some support from our local reps here, it can really help push it. I think that's how it started, was the local reps all came together and recognized that they need to do something. If you look at it just at face value, these areas are challenging areas that I think they recognize they're trying to, let's be honest, move away from. I think they're working, I don't want to call it defund the police because that was not a real narrative. It was how can we allocate resources to non-law enforcement needs? And I think they recognize these areas probably were areas where they thought they could do it. And I think that's how that originally got started.
So my ask would be, has any of our local representatives reached out to you yet?
No.
Okay, so I would ask that this committee, I mean, I obviously think that this is something very specific that we should be supporting, and that we talk to all of our representatives and ask someone to collaboratively file legislation both in the Senate and the House, and get all of the McHenry County representatives to sign on in their respective chambers as sponsors. I don't care who carries it, one of them carries it. And we have specific information, and that's what I would get from Kychek.
Yep.
What they used,
Yep.
and see where we fit into that, and or make the distinction that we're up and running, and that other people are using our program as a template. So, I mean, there's several different ways to do it, but that's something that I think that we should do, is to reach out to our local representatives and ask someone to take a lead in both of the chambers. Mr. Sager?
Are you aware, Sheriff, of other communities such as McHenry County that are already doing something that hasn't been recognized that is successful, or are we kind of the outlier here?
On a scale of how we did it, we're the outlier, where we took the ball, we provided the social workers, and we had buy-in from other agencies. I know that there's been some for-profit agencies that have been almost like on a cost basis, we can use their resources, but nothing like what we have done.
Thank you.
And I think that is the unusual aspect that we need to focus in on, is that we're providing it for other municipalities, which is an efficiency which reduces costs. So I think, again, that's the template, that's the example. So what I would say is that we need to spend some time reaching out to our elected officials and seeing what we can do, and keep in touch with you and let you know how that's progressing.
And I'll get back to you guys on your ask about how they originally got rolled out.
I'd be really interested in how they made that, if they use statistics, if they use data, if there was some kind of arrest thing, or, I would be real interested, because then we could provide the same information.
And I think you guys can use the information that Amy had given you guys at our last meeting about the recidivism, and it's actually working. So it's not like we're asking money for something that we hope to be working. I think we actually can give data of how it has worked, and to continue this, make this sustainable over however long we want to keep it running.
Excellent.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much. And I just want to take 2 seconds, and Adam, I don't want to put you on the spot, but maybe we could talk about, I'm going to talk first on solar, so I'll let you get ready, but maybe you could bring us an update on some of the things that we talked about with regard to the rodeo and the animal cruelty potential changes. And just to give you guys an update, I finally did make contact with the solar associations and had discussion about how potentially McHenry County, who has been very supportive of obviously solar, could have a little bit more authority at the county level at a certain point. And we did talk about, establishing a threshold that says that after this particular point, where we received some traction, where there was virtually no pushback, was on the possibility of allowing counties, just in general perhaps, of having more say-so and setting a higher level for the decommissioning costs of solar panels. So that's where the conversation is right now. I've got some people helping us with some language that we'll present, but hopefully minimally that will begin a conversation that we might get passed with the Solar Association's support. There was a conversation, I want you to understand what happened is during the negotiations of this last legislation, there was basically an agreement that no additional trailer legislation dealing with solar farms and counties would move forward. They were done for a period of time. That's why the support of the Solar Association is so important with regard to what we're asking, is because that's the only way I think that people will start to look at it. So we'll continue to work on that. We'll find one of our legislators to see if they're interested in helping us with that language, or ask the Solar Association who they want to carry that kind of a legislation. So that is moving forward, and those conversations are occurring. And I have been kept, our county administrator as well as our chairman, up to speed on all of those things that are going on.
So just to make sure I understand, there was an agreement between the Solar Association and legislators in
And the
Springfield?
leadership in Springfield.
Okay.
That's not unusual. I'm going to teach you all those things that you probably never knew, but that is not unusual. As part of those negotiations is that you agree to have a moratorium for 2 years, 3 years on anything else to see if what they put into place is in fact working. Whether they actually follow that, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, but that's not uncommon. And you want to give a little bit of background on why this is an issue with regard to some of the public comments that come before the board and what your department has been talking about?
Solar or rodeos?
Solar, excuse me, rodeos, solar.
Rodeos, all right, sure. All right, so rodeos, there's really two issues. Three.
Three.
Yeah, three issues.
Three.
Yeah, liquor, yeah, so, yes.
That's how I got it, yeah, liquor.
So and I'll let Pete and Kathy maybe chime in on the liquor, because it's obviously not at the forefront of my mind. But the two issues that P&E is really looking at too is safety of the animals, safety of spectators. So first, it would take the crowd control and the general safety of all the participants and the people, and then the sheriffs that are going to be there enforcing the security as well. That is, we're looking at that from triggers on crowd control and how many people attend the event, to then put in like an emergency action plan. That would be a coordinated review of the site, what type of additional people they would need there, whether it's medical or sheriffs or additional private security, how people ingress and egress, how they get onto the site, coming from the right of way all the way to the toilet rooms, all that sort of stuff.
Lighting?
Sure. So in addition to that, we would look at on-site medical light that would have those common paths all the way to those folks. And then, so basically you have a continuous light source. So whether that's temporary lighting, whether that's additional lighting, that these events that always have, reoccurring events, that they just get permanent lighting installed. Those are just some of the things that initially we're talking about just for that on-site, for the on-site attendees. And then we move over to the animals. That's there's two prongs. There's treatment of the animals, and then there's protection of the animals. Treatment is a very difficult thing to enforce. That's going to be largely through the on-site with the sheriff's office. Reporting. That's what we're looking at, and that's what we're promoting. And for the protection of the animals, what we're looking at is requiring on-site veterinarian. So staff that
On-site Illinois licensed
they
veterinarian.
would have to be licensed in the state. We did get feedback that some of these folks will have permit techs or vet techs out there, or they're just simply not licensed, but they are very good with animals. It doesn't work. So these folks, and where this regulation comes from largely is from the Rodeo Association. So they have some prescriptive measures that they would follow in order for an animal to start and do the event, and then in order for them to continue the event if something should. And then as far as liquor,
I think we could be a month away from having something to look at. I pushed honestly for today. Chairman Altoff, Chairman Bueller, Kathy met with the state's attorney's office. They know kind of what we'd like to see in there in terms of increasing control and slowing on the distribution, if you will. And I pushed for that to be here today. I was told to relax. I think November is realistic.
So there are ongoing efforts you need to be aware of. We do actually pay attention, obviously, as you can see, when people come before us and ask us to pay closer attention. We have had a few problems that law enforcement has brought to our attention. So we are doing something, and obviously we'll run it through this committee and make decisions. Mr. Sager.
I appreciate the fact that you kind of divided the question, because I think it's important to take a look at all these various facets, so thank you very much for that. With regards to the first area that you discussed, and that is the types of regulations for the structure of the event. we're not just looking though at rodeos. It would be basically any type of event, correct? With X number of people doing X type of things. We're not just singling out rodeos, we're looking at something that would be broader. Is that correct?
So we've looked at, it can be, right? And right now, it's all under a temporary entertainment event. And so rodeos fall in the same category as a wedding or a concert or anything like that.
Perfect.
And there would be, the answer is kind of yes, we would support that same staff would support that same initiative. Where it becomes a little bit more difficult is when we have these specific regulations, if they apply them to, whatever it might be, having on-site medical for a wedding or something like that triggers that. So there has been thought from the staff level to break them out into a rodeo event and a temporary entertainment
But they'd all
event.
fall under a similar category.
Yeah,
You're absolutely correct.
I
It's a good
agree
distinction.
100% that, there are specificities that are going to have to apply to particular types of events. Rodeos as an example, circuses as an example. But I think that we have to be very cautious. I think we have to be equitable in terms of our application of these types of things. And so I encourage that very strongly. The second element has to do with the animal rights and welfare. I can share with you honestly, having been involved in so many different livestock events and activities through the course of my career, I have very, very strong opinions about that, and I'll be happy to share those. I don't think that this is the appropriate place, but I do truly believe that the on-site veterinary care is perhaps the most pivotal element in this entire discussion, and so I very strongly concur with that type of requirement. I think that's absolutely essential and something that we need to stand up and almost to the point of pounding our fist on the table.
It's good to hear.
Any other questions? Yes, Ms. Campbell, then Ms. Wegner, and then Mr. Shorten.
I'm not sure I have a question so much, but to follow up on that a little bit, because I do think having the on-site vet is really critical, right? But you talked, right before that was the actual treatment of the animals to begin with. That gets them to that point where they need the on-site vet. And that's kind of where I think we get into a more difficult situation as to what is an appropriate event and how they're treated during the event. I mean, the fact that you have somebody on staff to actually take care of them after some of this stuff happens is kind of, it becomes complicated. And I think that you alluded to that. You said the treatment is a little bit different. That's more difficult in terms of how to address that. So I think that that's also something that we need to be part of the discussion.
And I would say there's more education, but Mr. Sager.
Yeah, I do agree. I think that that's the most difficult thing, and I'm not going to start getting into any conversation like that myself right now. But I think that sometimes there's a very strong misunderstanding about the fact that the individual owners of these animals are, and by virtue of being the owners, very good stewards of their animals. They are required to be in order to be able to have those animals and to be able to have them as a part of a business, whether that happens to be livestock industry or whether it happens to be an exposition or whether it happens to be an entertainment venue such as a rodeo or something like that. I mean, the stewardship is paramount, and most, not all, but most of these types of events have very significant and severe, if you will, penalties for violations that might occur in those regards. And so I think we need to be very, very careful about looking at that, and we have to be very well informed in terms of what already exists. And with all due respect, I have tremendous appreciation for animal rights and welfare, absolutely. But at the same time, there's a lot that is spoken out there that is done so without any true educational background in terms of what's going on. I think that we need to make sure that we look at that, but I agree that that's the most difficult issue for us to look at, and I think it's most appropriate that we look at all these, and I'm very grateful for the fact that we are, but I just think we have to be completely informed. That's all that I.
It is a fine line. Ms. Wagner?
So I just want to take a step back. I know this was all triggered by emails and public comment. How long have we had a rodeo?
Actually, no.
Yeah.
I'm going to correct you. It was
Okay.
not just emails and public comment. There have been some situations that were drawn to the attention by law enforcement at some of these events that also escalated the concern that we had.
It's good to know.
Yeah.
Is a rodeo something new in our county, or is this somebody who just started a rodeo? Or
It's a culture thing that's been around for a very long time. You probably just haven't been
No.
aware of it. But it's something, how long, Peter, have we been dealing with rodeos? You're not going to answer.
I don't have a good answer for you. I will tell you, this is the third county I've worked in, and it's the third county where I've dealt with rodeos.
Right.
And
DeKalb does it.
concerns by
That's
animal
good,
welfare
yeah.
rights groups. And it's, we're not unique in that sense, but it's a
Thank
big issue for a while.
all right, so, and we've never had anything specific to rodeos then in our
So-
zoning or anything?
They were added in 2000, rodeos were added as a temporary use, so we began regulating them in 2014 or 2008? I'll give you the date, I'll be guessing.
That's fine.
As you
I'm
can
just
see.
trying to find the background.
But we get them every year. We do have, I mean, we have maybe 3 or 4 that are really consistent, that they have rodeos, 3 of them a year. And as we understand it, and working with them, there is a very large Northern Illinois circuit that if they coordinate to ensure that they don't overlap, because that's the worst thing that can happen for them, is they have 2 at the same time, so.
Right, it's the same basic population that enjoys them and attends, so, okay. Oh, wait just a minute, Mr. Shorten goes, then Mr. Sager, are you good?
I'm good.
Mr. Shorten?
So just going back to Mr. Sawyer's comments earlier about how these rules for rodeos might spill over into other events, do we have regulations for, like, if someone has a farm and they want to have a wedding on it? Does that already exist?
Yeah, it's very similar. I mean, everyone's got a little bit of a different approach based on the existing conditions. And largely what we'll do is we'll do a walkthrough with the buildings being used. We'll do a walkthrough with our building inspectors, building official, and the fire district, just to kind of walk through that event, see where egress paths are going, see where, ambulances can get if they need to, all that. So depending on that event, that's how we'll treat it. So it's a very hands-on approach with that.
My concern would be, if we're trying to address one situation with the rodeo, which I don't know if the underlying issue is animal welfare or some sort of broader situation that's actually occurred.
Crowd control, animals, I mean, it's a bigger issue than just one. It's, what happened is several individual situations made us look at the whole, and so it's not one thing, it's several things.
Yeah, so my concern would be, stemming a situation where somebody wants to have a wedding on the farm, all of a sudden becomes this big albatross that they can handle, or someone wants to use their property for a nonprofit fundraiser, and it becomes, again, non-productive.
And I would tell you again, you have to think of size and situation. Small wedding on your property, nobody even knows you're doing it.
Right.
You invite 500 people and we now have cars backed up for 4 blocks, it's a problem. Mr. Zucker?
I don't want to get into this too much, but I do believe, again, that it's really important that we become aware of what types of regulations, oversight, responsibilities exist in terms of animal rights and welfare. There is a lot, and not to forward myself here too much, but I was responsible for the Department of Agriculture for writing up the rules and regulations associated with animal rights and welfare for the Illinois State Fairs. And so I have written those. I also wrote in the past for the city of Woodstock our animal control ordinances that exist there. And I think that we just need to be very, very, very much aware of the work, if you will, that has already been done that could provide some guidelines if, in fact, we decide that we want to go down that pathway. I don't have an aversion to going down that pathway. I do have strong, though, aversion to kind of going out there on our own and starting to be very, very restrictive without understanding how the industry works on one hand, the broader industry of animal events and activities, and the fact that there's been a lot in this area.
And we also have to look at the, trickle-down effect too, is training whomever it is that is responsible for going and doing that. You're absolutely correct, Mr. Sager. It's a much larger issue than just saying this. So again, it might take a little while and it might come at us bits and pieces, but I just wanted you all to be aware that it's an issue that is being addressed by administration and staff, the appropriate staff. So you can tell constituents that we did not ignore them, we did listen. I have actually nothing else for legislative update except again to say that I'd like, if you still have ideas, and I have shared this with people who called and indicated that they weren't quite ready within the next 2 weeks, so we have an opportunity to kind of review what's being submitted. I'm trying hard to keep things either broad, falls under unfunded mandates, or is very specific. Nothing in between that's kind of gray and might lead us one way or another. So, Mr. Sutton.
Yeah, I trust, though, that we're willing to continue to work in collaboration with the Council of Governments, obviously.
We have, yes.
And the efforts that are ongoing there, because I know that this gets to be old to talk about this, but LGDF continues to be a very
it's on our list.
Right, a very strong concern, as well as the charges associated with the fees for processing our own monies, and that's happening across the board for all units of government, and I just think that that's, for some opinion, that's absurd, but nonetheless.
It's a money grab. But yes, I mean, I think that we've done that. That's what I'm saying. We've done that in kind of a broad perspective, and it carries over on the legislative agenda every year. And we do work through Alicia. We work very closely with McCog as well as ISACO and other organizations just to make sure. And we will start, actually, we talked about potentially December inviting our legislators to find out if they're doing something specific that we need to be aware of to support. So we'll start that in kind of a phase in, hopefully before January, so we know what they're going to file. So I thank you for all of that. It's it's fits and starts for us. We haven't had a legislative program in a very long time. So we're getting used to doing that again. Moving on then, we have no presentations, we have no old business, we have no reports, we have no need for executive session, so I will take a motion to adjourn. Mr. Shorten, seconded by Ms. Campbell. All those in favor say aye. Aye.